You're the founder and CEO of Walpert Properties. You founded the company in 1989. Since then, you've bought, sold a variety of retail assets in 6 states, totaling about $400 million. You are the most well-known, and from what I've heard, one of the most well-respected retail real estate minds in St. Louis.
Today, I would say a large majority of our tenants are what I would consider service-type tenants. Nail salons, hair salons. You can't get your nails painted on the internet. Can't get a haircut on the internet. The bottom line is a gut feel. And you can't look at a picture on the internet. When I buy a shopping center, I'm putting my name on it. I'm guaranteeing the debt. I'm putting my friends in the deal. I want to make sure they get their money back and they get a good return. So the bottom line main thing is a gut feel for that property.
Bob, thank you for taking the time.
Raj, thanks. Happy to be here.
I really appreciate you making the trip. I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. You're the founder and CEO of Walpert Properties. You founded the company in 1989. Since then, you've bought, sold a variety of retail assets in 6 states, totaling about $400 million. Over the last year or two, you've really focused on the St. Louis market and kind of simplifying your operations. I think you have an incredible story to tell, and you are, for anyone that's not from St. Louis, one of, I would say, the most well-known, and from what I've heard, one of the most well-respected retail real estate minds in St. Louis. So thank you for taking the time.
That's a great compliment. Thank you.
I'd love to kind of get started on where you first were exposed to retail real estate or entrepreneurship, and if you could give us some background on where your journey started, where you grew up.
Grew up in St. Louis, born and raised. Grew up in Olivet. Had a great childhood. My dad was in World War II, so they built a home in 1960 when I was 4 years old and moved to Olivet, and that was a big deal on the GI Bill. And they came from a $35 a month apartment to a $50 a month mortgage payment, which was a huge increase, when they built a $20,000 or $25,000 house in the suburbs. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, a typical 50s housewife, and my dad went to work for a company after World War II and was with the same company his entire career. He was a manufacturer's rep for men's clothing. And I remember going with him when he'd go to small towns to menswear stores, and he had the suits and sport coats in his trunk, and he'd get them out and set up the rack and take them in, and they would say, we'll take 2 brown and 3 blue suits, and he'd come back that night and sit at the kitchen table and handwrite the order. And so he worked hard, and I saw from an early age. I had wonderful parents. I had a great childhood, but I went to Ladue High School, and I was on the poorer side of that district where there's very large homes in Ladue, and I saw the way some other people lived. And I think I got that spark early on from being exposed to wealth and living like that. I had friends. I went on trips with them and saw the way other people lived. And I think at an early age, I had that fire in my belly to make money.
That's an incredible story. I have to ask, at that time, were entrepreneurs in the U.S. kind of idolized the way they are today in the media, or just generally speaking?
Well, I think what you're referring to, the younger generation today on social media, they see people flashing, the fancy cars and cash and big houses, and it looks easy to young people. And anybody that went the route that most of us did, it's a very long, circuitous route. It's not an overnight situation. But I started working at an early age. When I was 15, I was into magic. I did magic shows, so I did kids' birthday parties. And some of my friends were working for like $1.75 an hour, and I was making $20 for an hour birthday party. So that was pretty cool. I didn't even have a driver's license yet. My mom would drive me. And so I think that's what started the entrepreneurial spark. And then I graduated high school, went to University of Missouri in Columbia, joined a fraternity, made great friends, had a great time. But I was not what I would say would be academically motivated. I was having fun and looking to make money and socializing and doing other things. And my grades were okay, but I wasn't really focused on that. And I lived in the fraternity house. I joined a fraternity. And then the guys moved out after the second year and got apartments. And I thought it would be cool to buy a house rather than rent an apartment. I was 19 years old. I had no money, didn't know anything about real estate, but I walked into I remember passing this building. It was a freestanding building. It was called Plaza Realty. I remember it well. I was 19 years old, walked in there. I remember the guy's name, Ron Westenhaver, and I said, I want to buy a house. Well, he was very nice to me. He took a liking to me and ended up selling me a house for $22,000. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Columbia, Missouri. This was 1975, 76. And had a $20,000 assumable first mortgage, and he carried a $2,000 second mortgage. And I had to come up with about $300 of closing costs. I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. And closed on this house, had 2 friends live and rent those 2 rooms. And so I lived there for free. So it was a pretty cool real estate deal. And I left, that's another whole story, but I left Columbia about a year later, turned it over to a property manager. He was collecting the rent, put a tenant in. And about a year later, he called me and said, I have an unsolicited offer. I've got somebody that wants to buy your house for $32,000. So he sent me a check for $10,000. And I think I was 20 or 21. And so it was the proverbial no money down deal. And I made $10,000, which was a tremendous amount of money at any time for a 20-year-old. But so that really whet my appetite for real estate. But the reason I left school, a friend of mine that was a year older than me came back after a summer with all these stories about all this money he made selling pots and pans door to door. And there were several of us from the fraternity house that were intrigued. And we, at the end of the school year, went and tried it. And there were probably 30 or 40 of us from the fraternity house that went and did it. And at the end of the day, I don't know how many actually stayed there for more than a few days because it wasn't easy. It was door to door, and it was, you'd have to talk to, the goal was to sell 20 of these sets a day, and you'd have to talk to 200 people to sell 20 of them. Most people wouldn't talk to you. And anyway, it progressed, and by the end of the summer, I got real good at it and was making good money, and went back to school and got my books and my roommate, and I was, again, this was like 1976, I think, and we were making several $100s a day selling pots and pans door to door. And so I went back, got my book, signed up for class, and I'm looking at the professor with 500 people in the room with the big screen. I'm thinking, I bet that guy's not making $300 today. And I went and called my parents, said I'm going to take a semester off. I got to strike while the iron's hot. I want to make some money. And my parents were upset. I'm the youngest of 3, and I'm the only boy, and my dad didn't get to go to college because of the World War. And so anyway, I went and bought a brand new pickup truck, filled it with pots and pans, hit the road, and it was a tremendous life experience. I ended up not going back to school. I did it for 3.5 years.
Wow.
Not just making money, but the life experience of talking to people and seeing the country and being in different places. It was, you were with a group of your friends. It was a crew, and it was a great life experience. So after that, I came back to St. Louis, and I knew in my mind that whole time that I wanted to be in real estate. Didn't know much about it, but I knew that was going to be my direction. And came back and just started talking to people around town, friends, attorneys, accountants, anybody I knew. Do you know anybody in commercial real estate? And my cousin said, here's a guy you should talk to. and he ended up, he was running the St. Louis office of a company out of Kansas City called Leo Eisenberg Company. They're long gone, but it was a real estate development company. And I didn't know what a square foot was. I got lucky. He hired me. So that was kind of the blind squirrel finding the nut. I mean, I could have met somebody that was in office or industrial or apartments or whatever. I just happened to meet somebody who was in retail, and that's what I learned. And he was a good teacher. I went to all his meetings, and I listened and asked questions. And so he was developing Kroger-anchored centers in central Illinois at the time. And he said, what you're going to do is go knock on doors and lease space. I said, I've just been doing that for 3 years. I can certainly do that. So that's how I started, knocking on doors, leasing space, going and asking the barber or Hallmark cards, are you happy with your space? Are you going to open a second store? And trying to find prospects to lease space. And then along the way, I would ask the landlords, would you sell your shopping center? And you always got the same answer, for the right price. So in addition to leasing, I was selling investment property and trying to put buyers and sellers together. So if somebody said, yes, I'll sell, try to put them together. And then more than once, you'd get to the closing table and there was a roof problem, and they'd say, well, just take it out of the commission. And so I started getting squeezed on commissions, and I thought, I'm going to try to control my own destiny. Instead of being a broker, I'm going to try to be a principal and try to buy one of these shopping centers. So back to the fake it till you make it real estate model of I found a shopping center and a guy that I convinced that I had the capability of putting a deal together. I was, again, mid-20s, didn't have any money, didn't have any assets. I don't think I owned a home yet, but I was able to get it under contract. I remember the numbers. It was $1.2 million, and I got this guy at a bank to give me a loan commitment for $800,000, and I needed $400,000 in cash. And I was 25 or 26, so 3 or 4 years out of school. And a lot of my friends had said, they're already in their careers as, accountants, engineers, whatever. If you find a real estate deal, I've got a little extra money. So that first deal to raise $400,000, I think I had 30 to 40 people in that deal, $5,000-$10,000 a piece. And I got a piece as general partner and put this deal together and closed on it. And that was the first one. It was a lot of fun, a great feeling to close that deal. And I worked that property very hard, created value, raised rents. And a couple years later, I think we refinanced it, pulled money out and bought another one. And so my reputation grew, that people said, hey, he did a good job and I got a good return. And the next time, maybe I found people with $25,000 or $50,000. So I raised a lot of equity over the years putting deals together.
So it was very organic in terms of the way you grew that pot of potential equity investors. Very much word of mouth and track record based.
It was the term friends and family. I mean, it was people I knew, and my friends became my business partners, and business people became my friends. That was the inner circle of my world was, bankers and everybody I did business with. It was one and the same. And, my old friends from school and people I met in business, and it just kind of mushroomed. So that was, in the mid to late 80s. And so I worked for the same person for 9 years. I left there in 1989 and started my company, Walpert Properties. And that was a pretty tough time. 1989, properties were going back to banks. But it just seemed like the right time for me. And I remember one friend of mine in the real estate business said, Walpert, you're jumping off the high dive with 2 feet in the water, two feet of water in the pool. And I remember that. But I always had guts. I never had fear of trying something, and if it failed, I would go on to something else. Everybody's got different DNA, but I always had that feeling of guts. And so I started the company. It was me and one other guy. His name was Mike Rizzo. We're still very good friends. And he was 23. He was going for his MBA. He was working for Boeing. No real estate experience. We had met. I actually met him through his father. And we were both runners, so we started jogging together in the mornings. And after a few months, I came out to the driveway to run. I said, guess what I did yesterday? I resigned from the company I'm with. I'm going to start my own company. He said, I'm coming with you, because he had heard the real estate story. So he had zero experience. He was just a great guy. And that's how I've chosen the people for me to be around. It wasn't experience. It was people skills and people that I wanted to be around. That was the most important ingredient, and it's served me well. So we started and just started knocking on doors, passing out cards, and then about 2 years later, we found our first acquisition. It was in North County at 270 and Newhalls Ferry. It was an old Central Hardware. Some people are too young to remember Central Hardware. It was way before Home Depot and Lowe's. It was the local hardware chain. It was an old building, but it was, I forget how many acres, 18, 19 acres. It had 2,000 feet of frontage on the interstate.
Wow. Okay.
So we just thought the underlying value of that real estate was great. And I think we got it under contract for $2.2 million. We were really doing it for a land play for redevelopment. And we needed $600,000 of equity. So I hadn't raised money in about 4 or 5 years. And I said, well, I'm not sure I can raise $600,000, but here's my list of people. And the first guy's name on the list I had never met. He invested $50,000 in another deal. He was recommended to me by his CPA, who's a mutual friend. So I called him. I said, I don't know if this guy's got another $50,000 or not, but Mike and I went down to his house, sat at his kitchen table, explained the deal, and he said, how much you looking for? I said, well, it's $600,000, 12 units of $50,000 each. He said, you okay if I do the whole thing? And I kind of paused, and I said, so he met us at the title company the next day with a check for $600,000. And that guy was our main investor. We had a lot of investors, but we made a lot of money together. He had a lot of faith in us. And that particular deal ended up, we tore that down and did a Home Depot and a Shop and Save and redeveloped that center. So we did some value add developments and redevelopments over the years. Most of the centers, I acquired existing centers, but some of them we did develop.
With that first deal, the 18, 19 acres, did you end up seeing that through as what you were initially expecting going in, like a covered land play, or did it end up working out differently than your initial expectations?
Well, as I said, the building was very, very old. It was in really bad shape. We were looking at it as a land play. We just saw the underlying value of all the frontage on the interstate, and it was a pretty low price for the real estate, so we figured, there's going to be some higher and better use here. We weren't sure exactly what. And then Home Depot, a couple years later, started heating up in the market, and we were able to make a Home Depot deal.
Got it. When you're working with a company like a Home Depot and some of the other larger tenants, you're either moving into a center or maybe selling some ground to, do you find that it's very difficult to, one, make the connection with their contacts, but then two, go through their red tape or processes versus working with some of the smaller tenants?
No question about it. Development is a very complex business. There were some deals with, land assemblage. There could be environmental issues, zoning issues, topography issues, rock. Building something from ground up is a completely different business than acquiring an existing shopping center. Very, very difficult. But as they say, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I surrounded myself with people that I thought were, good at what they did. So as we grew over the years, as I said, we started the company in 1989. There was me, one other person, and a secretary. And then We had explosive growth over the years throughout the 90s and early 2000s. And then in 2008, when the music stopped, we had 37 people. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we had 10 agents, in-house counsel, 2 marketing people. We were pretty vertically integrated, and we were doing a lot of different things: acquisition, development, tenant rep, leasing, investment property sales. And it was, just every year was better than the year before. And so it grew pretty exponentially. We had a formula that we found to acquire these shopping centers. So our model was more B and C grade shopping centers. We couldn't compete and afford to buy something in West St. Louis County or St. Charles County back then, because those were going on much lower cap rates. So we would target North County or some middle to lower demographic areas and older shopping centers where we could buy on higher cap rates. So back in the day, we would buy on 10, 11, 12 cap rates and finance at 5 to 6. Well, when you buy an 11 or 12 cap and finance at 5 to 6, the cash on cash return is pretty high double digits. So it was pretty fun to raise equity. You could sit in front of somebody and say, you put your 100,000 in, you get this big return, and I think we can create value by, redeveloping an outlot, doing this, turning it inside out, whatever we were proposing to do. And so the equity always came. And the interesting thing about the way we built our portfolio was mainly relationships with brokers. So we were pretty well known. We were closers. So and we were in multiple states. So a broker would call and say, I've got a client in Kansas City, an older guy. He's going to retire. He's got 2 shopping centers. So we'd hop in the car and go shake his hand and kick the bricks and draft a contract and close. Today, that deal, those 2 shopping centers, would be put on the internet. 20,000 people would see it, and you might get 14 or 18 offers, and then they would say, give us your best and final, and give us proof of funds. So it's a lot different today. I could not build my portfolio the way I did. The internet's a wonderful thing. It's done a lot of great things for us and for society and for the real estate industry, but that's the main difference. It was personal relationships. And I remember the first time I heard, I would get a $5 or $10 million shopping center under contract. I didn't have $5 or $10 million. I would get it under contract. I'd go to the bank first and get the loan commitment, then figure out how much equity we need. If we need $2 million, I'd start dialing for dollars and call my list of investors, and they had done well in the other deals. And I had doctors, dentists, and they'd pick up the phone, and I'd say, it's in Topeka, Kansas, and he'd cut me off mid-sentence, put me down for 100. So they had confidence that I knew what I was doing. We were managing the centers well, and we could create value. They weren't micromanaging what and where the shopping center was. So it got pretty easy to raise equity. But I started to say, I'll never forget the time I heard, I'm not sure what year it was, from a young broker from CB or Marcus and Millichap. I'd been buying shopping centers for 25, 30 years, and I heard him say, we need proof of funds. And the first time I heard that, I thought, man, what an arrogant young guy. What is that? What do you mean? I have to show you that I have $5 million in my checking account to get this shopping center under contract? Well, that's what it became. And there's more equity on the sidelines today than ever. There's so much money out there. And so that is the world today, is the funds and the high net worth individuals and people with the cash, which, as I said back then, we'd get the deal under contract, then I'd go out and raise the equity. I never did a blind pool. I always did it deal by deal. So I sat in front of somebody and said, this is what and where it is, and this is why we're buying it, and what we think we can do with it, and how we can increase value, and what your return's going to be on this specific deal. And it was a pretty successful model.
During your the beginning years, but then also the rapid growth in the early 90s, mid 90s. You kind of alluded to this with the internet comment. So today, real estate in general, specifically commercial real estate, has become a little more efficient and de-risked in a way, just because there's so much data you can access. If you're a broker, you can, like you were saying, send the deal out to hundreds of people if you want. You can look at data points for setting your rents. On the management side, it's slightly easier to manage now versus even 10 years ago, because you have more automation or things that can be done online. When you were going in the early years and during the rapid growth, how were you truly determining whether or not a deal fits in your buy box? What was the buy box? And then how were you getting access to the data points you need, like even on a particular market or submarket?
That's a really interesting question, Raj. Pre-internet, it's like any other industry. You start knowing your business. So I can pull in a parking lot of a shopping center. Ingress, egress is very important. You want to see where the curb cuts are. Visually, how does the property look? The facade, the parking lot, the tenant mix, the configuration. Is it sideways, backwards, upside down, two-story? You wouldn't believe over the years what people built thinking they can squeeze more square footage in by going, two-story retail rarely works. Sometimes they'll go perpendicular to, all kinds of crazy things. So you want to make sure it faces the road, the basic ingredients. And but the bottom line is, people say, what cap rate are you looking for? Well, that's one ingredient. Tenant mix, condition, age. There's so many other things involved. Are the rents under market? Are they over market? Are the leases short term? Are they coming up? Are they month to month? So that all goes into the pot. But the bottom line is a gut feel. And you can't look at a picture on the internet. I actually remember, and as we were expanding in multiple states, and I'll talk about that in a minute, I remember getting a property under contract. It was in Jacksonville, Florida. It looked fantastic on paper. Great tenant mix, good-looking shopping center, the right numbers. As soon as the ink was dry on the contract, we booked flights, flew down there. The agent picked us up. I pulled in the parking lot, and I said, let's go back to the airport. Pulled in the parking lot, and that was it. I terminated. And so when I buy a shopping center, I'm putting my name on it. I'm guaranteeing the debt. I mean, some of them were non-recourse debt, but for the most part, they were bank debt, 75, 80% bank debt. So I'm guaranteeing that debt. I'm putting my friends in the deal, and I want to make sure they get their money back and they get a good return. So I have to live with that property. So that is the bottom line main thing is a gut feel for that property.
That gut feel, my personal opinion is, that's developed through expertise in your area, the knowledge, and then experience. You can't wake up and have the gut feel, but do you feel differently? Do you think that's something you're possibly born with and then it just becomes better through experience?
I don't know that you're born with it. I mean, it's just like any other industry. You ask somebody in the metal industry, well, how do you sell it? Well, I know everybody in the industry. That's why I pick up the phone and I know people. Same thing here. I go to the shopping center convention. I've been going for 40 years. You walk down the hall, you know everybody. So I can look at a shopping center and look at a vacancy and say, boy, that would be perfect for Dollar Tree. That'd be perfect for Big Lots. You just have a feel for who might go in that space and what you can do with that shopping center. But I started to say how we grew into multiple states. We obviously started in St. Louis. I'm born and raised in St. Louis. And early on in the early 90s, started bringing on one broker per year. I had kind of a rule to myself. I wanted to give each person a full year of my attention and before I brought in the next one. So each guy, he's out doing leasing and tenant rep and investment property sales, but also looking for acquisitions. So we had this business model where if they found the shopping center, brought it in, he and I would guarantee the debt together. I'd go out and raise the equity, and we'd be shoulder-to-shoulder partners on it, and then the equity investors would get a piece of it. So when I hired the second, third, fourth person, there's only so many shopping centers in St. Louis. We started running into each other. So we literally sat around the conference room table, and one guy said, I'll take Kansas City. Another guy said, I'll take Cincinnati and Columbus. Another guy said, I'll take Indiana. And that's how we grew. They were very focused, and each guy went to that market, set up breakfast and lunch meetings with brokers and find out who the owners were and knocked on doors. And that's how we found deals. And we had a formula that worked, raising that equity, which again would not work today with the interest rate environment and the cap rate environment. The disparity between as I said, buying on double-digit cap rates and financing at 5 or 6%, the numbers really worked well. But we were buying the B and C grade properties, not the high-end properties.
When you had like a broker go out to Kansas City, for example, you're telling him to look for B and C properties, but what else was in that buy box of what they should target and bring back to you?
They were typically $2 to $5 million deals, neighborhood shopping centers. We had a lot of mom and pop tenants, and again, back to the ingredients of ingress, egress, visibility, parking. It had to check all those boxes first.
The neighborhood shopping center, how do you define that? Because when I think of neighborhood shopping center, I could be thinking of like a grocery anchored retail center or a little strip center with maybe 10 units in it. So how do you define that?
Ours is more the latter. We never really had the big boxes. Again, by design, we weren't buying $30 million deals. We were neighborhood centers, which is, today I would say a large majority of our tenants are what I would consider service type tenants. Nail salons, hair salons, Subway. First thing I do is look at a rent roll. You can't get your nails painted on the internet. Can't get a haircut on the internet. Can't get a pizza on the internet. Can't get your dry cleaning done on the internet. Now, some of them, you can go on the website and order something and pick it up or have it delivered, but they still need bricks and mortar. So very few of our tenants are what I would call traditional retail, where they're selling a product. It's mostly service type tenants, which is why I'm still very bullish on the neighborhood strip center. You really haven't seen much speculative development in the last 10 or 15 years. Number one, cost of construction. It would cost $400 a foot to build a neighborhood strip center today, where we're in most of ours for, say, $100 to $150 a foot. And our rents are between $10 and $20 a square foot triple net. If you built a new shopping center today, you would need $40 to $50 rents. So the old days when speculative strips were being built, if you were getting $10, $12, $14 a foot and somebody built one across the street, you'd lose a couple tenants. They'd hop across the street, maybe they'd pay 16 instead of 14, and they'd get the new shopping center. That doesn't exist anymore. So unless somebody either goes out of business or outgrows their space, the tenant retention is extremely high. We really don't lose a tenant. And our occupancy rate is the highest it's ever been historically. Nationwide, in retail, the vacancy rate now is 4.2%, but that includes junior boxes and big boxes. So if you take those out of the mix, it's actually 2% for the small shops. And so there's different types of real estate, obviously. The Bed Bath & Beyonds and the Joann Fabrics, the big junior boxes that went bankrupt, you can buy all that stuff on the internet. Whereas, as I said, you can't get a manicure on the internet. And those buildings have actually pretty much already been absorbed. A lot of entertainment type concepts, Sky Zone or Slick City, the slides, a lot of entertainment type venues as well as other retail. So they really didn't last long because, again, building that new would be 3 or 4 times what the existing boxes would be for those types of uses.
That makes a lot of sense. And you were well ahead of your time focusing on the neighborhood strip centers, because now it's very popular as an asset type for folks to target, at least from what I've seen. I've seen it really grow in popularity the last few years. And you see the broker emails all the time with the internet resistant tenant mix and things like that. So I think you were well ahead of your time there. Was there a point, and we kind of spoke about this briefly before starting to record, where you started to look at other asset classes or asset types. And
I did. Over the years, I did look at office warehouse space and things. And at the end of the day, I thought it was important to focus on one asset class and not try to be a jack of all trades. And I'm glad I did. I did do one multifamily development. A friend and partner brought me the deal. And, it's interesting. I mentioned earlier, surround yourself with the right people. And you got to know your limitations and your assets and liabilities. And, my strong point is people skills and structuring deals and networking. This partner, he's a wonderful guy. Love him like a brother. He does not have that same skill set that I do, but his skill set is more of the technical nature. So anyway, when he brought me the deal, it had sat on his desk for quite a while, and I don't think he would have ever figured out how to put it together. But as soon as I saw it, I went to my bank, got a construction loan, got out and raised the equity, and we put the deal together. And I don't know that he could have done that without me. But once we got under construction and the meetings with the engineers, he ran circles around me and all the entitlements and the contractors. I could not have developed the property without him. It was out of my bailiwick. But I don't know that he could have structured the deal without me. So it's important to surround yourself with the right people, good people, and people that have skill sets other than your own, which, I find the smartest attorney you can, the best CPA, engineers, architects, good reputations, good skill sets.
it sounds like you did that internally with your own company as well. Aside from, with partnerships, it sounds like for your company to grow the way it did, you had to have been hiring people that were just truly experts in their areas, whether it's operations, leasing, whatever the case is.
Not really. It depends. If it's a practitioner, like for instance, our CFO, his name is Barry Nichols, has been with us 34 years. He had a public accounting background, came from KPMG, very smart. It was the right mix, and he's been with us through the good, the bad, and the ugly, the ups and downs, and so he knows every tenant, every investor, every aspect of the portfolio is, but again, has a different skill set than I do. I couldn't sit in his chair, and he couldn't sit in mine. So, when it comes to things like that, accounting, marketing, yes, you want people with experience, but the brokers that I hired over the years, I really preferred no experience. I just picked people that I liked. Boy, I could hang out with this guy. He's a great guy. He's smart. He's likable. I can teach him the rest. In my experience, the people that came with experience probably didn't work out as well. Might be a generalization, but I typically liked on the sales side people without experience.
It sounds like with the brokers that you were bringing in particular, you were spending a lot of time with them and then putting a lot of trust with them for them to be partners with you on deals they found.
Right.
Did that structure end up? I know you said it worked out at least during the rapid growth, but throughout the whole time frame that the brokers were partnered with you, or maybe still are in some deals, do you feel like in hindsight that was the right way to go about it? Just making the pie larger and splitting it versus trying to retain 100% ownership?
No man's an island. You can't do everything yourself. And I was kind of the cog in the middle of the wheel then, and those 8 or 9 guys were out in the field finding the deals. My expertise was raising the equity. They raised some, but I raised a majority of the equity and structured the deals. And then they were in charge of that deal. They would oversee, we had property managers, but they would oversee the asset management, the leasing, and the ultimate disposition. So it was a really good formula. It was good people. And then, of course, 2008 came. And as I said, we really beefed up over the year. When that happened, we had 37 people. It was a substantial company. We were a force in the market. We had a lot of signs around town. A lot of listings in addition to the properties that we owned. And when that happened, let me digress for 1 minute. We got to a point where the portfolio was the largest it ever was. It was over 5 million square feet. And again, we kind of sat around the table and said, boy, it sure seems like an opportune time to be a seller. So we kind of put the feelers out, and we ended up going under contract with a group out of LA, and it was a very large deal, and it actually hit the newspaper. I still have the newspaper article that the whole portfolio was being sold. It was over $300 million at the time. And it's funny, people read that and thought I was going to have $300 million. But you know, when you see or read that, you don't know how much debt somebody has, how many partners they have. You know, we had hundreds of investors. But anyway, it got out. It was public pretty quickly, and we had a lot of employees. Good employees started leaving, and people started calling and congratulating us. And anyway, I'll never forget where I was standing when my cell phone rang when the buyer called and said we were financing it through Lehman Brothers and they just pulled the plug. So I kind of had a double whammy in that now the downward slide was going on, but I had a head start because we lost half our staff because they thought we were selling. And so after that, it was the toughest time in my life. I mean, the registered letters started coming from banks, and at the time, I was very exposed. We had several things under construction, some speculative deals, and in hindsight, you can be a Monday morning quarterback and look back and say, are there deals I shouldn't have done? Well, of course. Your ego gets away from you, and I can do no wrong. Where's the next deal? Where do I sign? And they just kept growing and growing and growing. And as I said, the registered letters started coming from banks, and the problems started, and it was a very, very difficult time. And it went on for a couple of years, and it was a different skill set trying to work out of that. And I know some people ran from it literally and changed their phone number. I hit it head on and sat down with each bank and said, this problem's bigger than I am. I signed on a $10 or $20 million loan. What are we going to do here? And it was interesting how, a majority of them, there was nothing fundamentally wrong with the real estate. Nothing really happened. I'll give you an example of a deal. One of my partners, Mark Pearl, he developed a relationship with Shop and Save, which was, big national credit tenant. We had built one on St. Charles Rock Road, developed it, and sold it, and made a nice profit. And this one, it was Big Ben and 141, which is a great signalized intersection, great demographics. It was a very complex development. I remember we built like a 40-foot retaining wall. The topography was tough. We had to assemble different parcels. As you mentioned earlier, negotiating the lease with a 500-pound gorilla, with a national company, they want to own the property without paying for it. They want every right in the lease. It took a long, long time. But anyway, we finally got it done, and it was a $10 million development. It was a local bank. We never got turned down by a bank. It was a gravy train. That was the easy part. Not just me, but you call from a cell phone from your car and borrow $1 million. Every bank said yes to everything. So we borrowed $10 million from a local bank, and the day we put the shovel in the ground, and it took 12 or 14 months until they were open selling groceries, but the market to sell that asset was, say, around a 5 cap, and we were building it at, I forget the cap rate, but there was a $1 million to $2 million profit in it the day it was finished, and you'd have a brand new 20-year lease with a credit company. You can sell it. Well, you know what's coming. Then 2008 hits while we're under construction, and the bank calls us in one day and says, we have this new appraisal for $9 million. So give us $1 million pay down or we're going to foreclose. And at this point, we had finished. They were open for business, beautiful building. And I said, what are you talking about? It's a 20-year bondable lease with a public company. It's the same real estate, same rent, same lease, same tenant. Nothing's changed except the perception of the value of the real estate. Just wait, there won't be a problem. Nope, we have this appraisal, mark to market. So of course, if you go down the street to another bank, they're going to get the same appraisal, so you can't move the loan. So we ended up selling it for $1 million loss. And the buyer laughed all the way to the bank. You know, they had the cash, they bought it at a much higher cap rate, and we lost the property. And, you know, that was one example. And when this happened, you know, if we had 45, 50 shopping centers at the time, maybe 8 or 9 of them were a problem. You say, well, it's only 20%. But when you have a $10 million problem and then a $14 million problem and an $8 million problem, and so it was really something. So signed deficiency notes, gave properties back to banks. And again, there was nothing we did wrong. We didn't lie, we didn't cheat, we didn't steal, just the market went down. And so I did pretty well over the years, but you can only write a check for $500,000 so many times. So it was very, very trying. And this organization that we built of 37 people with marketing people and agents and accounting staff and in-house counsel started downsizing and people started leaving. So the brokers couldn't make a living in 2010. So some of them got out of the industry. Others went to other companies on salary or, you know, just dispersed. Pretty much still friends with all of them. You know, there was no hard feelings. It was just the market. And one partner's still with me, Mike Hurwitz. We've been together 35 years. He, for whatever reason, some of the properties he had didn't get affected as much. We got through it. And anyway, it was one of the most difficult times of my life. You know, we all have difficult times of burying our parents or a divorce or whatever difficult time in life. But that was an incredibly difficult time. And I had so many problems at once. You know, there were some dark days. I'm a very positive person. There were a couple days I remember I just didn't know what to do. I remember went and met with this guy. He's an attorney, and he was like a workout specialist for commercial real estate people. And had a series of meetings with him, and he had me convinced that we should throw them all in a pot, and he called it blend and extend, go to the banks and say, well, you know, throw a little cash in and, you know, extend the leases, extend the loans and, you know, give a little to each person. He had a big fee in it for himself. And I was about ready to sign up with him. And my wife has been an integral part of my journey. She's not in the real estate business. She is now, but then she's in the medical field. She's a doctor. She's very smart, but didn't know much about shopping centers. Well, when this happened, she actually dove in. I was bringing boxes of operating agreements home, and she'd sit there and read and highlight and actually go to the meetings with me. You know, it's one thing to come home and say, honey, you wouldn't believe what this banker said to me today. It's another thing for her to be sitting there in the meeting. So she was really a big part of my strength. But I remember I was about to sign up with this guy, and it was my wife that said, you are the one that built this. You're the only one that can get yourself through it. And that's what gave me the strength. And I remember calling the guy the next morning and saying, I'm going to do this myself. And you know what he said to me? He said, you won't be standing in a year. And that motivated me more. And I got through it. I didn't go bankrupt. I, you know, as I said, pledged this one and refinanced that one. But I sat down with each person and I got through it. And it took years to pay everything back, but I kept assets and got through it.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing. Two quick questions on that. One, aside from your wife and just your internal fire, where did you find the strength to get through it and the motivation? And then also, just for my own clarification, the properties themselves had strong rents, occupancy, and income was fine, but the issue was more so with the banks on most of these deals?
For the most part.
Okay.
There's one deal I can think of that we bought, really good location. It's about 70% leased. We had a signed lease with a bank for the end cap, a 10-year lease credit. And we had a $2 million rehab planned. We had the money borrowed from the bank, had the equity raised, closed on it, and then '08 hit. And the bank said, we're not taking possession, sue us. And what we paid for the property didn't sustain. And then we lost a couple more tenants. All of a sudden, we're 55% leased. And so that case, we just got caught in wrong timing. But I'd say a large majority of them, like the shop and save I described, nothing wrong with the underlying real estate, the tenant, the lease, nothing other than the market, changing the market values. But if people were sitting on the sidelines with cash in '08, there was a very opportune time. And I was on the other side of it a couple times, where banks were selling notes. I heard that I was on a list. There was an $80 million list floating around with other well-known real estate people in St. Louis on it. And somebody called me and said, did you know one of your properties is on there? I said, no, I didn't. And ended up buying the note for a fraction of what I owed and brought my debt down. The banks were running around the sky is falling, and they lost a fortune. The taxpayers paid for it. So I was on the other end 2 times, and it actually bought my debt down. But there's books written on it. It's a pretty crazy time. Your other question, how did I get through it? I thrive on, business is problem solving. And most of my life, it was good problem solving. And when it came to the tough problem solving, I still thrived on it. I said, I can put one foot in front of the other and get through this. Faith, family. I have 5 children and 7 grandchildren now, and a lot of great people around me, a lot of great friends. And you just, whatever you have to do, you just keep moving forward. And, I remember the story about the 2 mice that fell into the bucket full of cream, and the first one became despondent very quickly and gave up and drowned. And the second one fought and fought and fought, and eventually he churned the cream into butter and he climbed out. And that really reverberates with me, and I'll never forget that because I never gave up. I remember one friend of mine that was in a lot of my deals. When I was going through these workouts, I remember I needed his signature. I went to his house at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, and he reminded me of that several times later. He said, that's the difference between you and some other people. They might have curled up in the fetal position. You were working night and day to do what you needed to do, and I did. I just didn't give up.
I've never heard that 2 mice and the bucket of cream before, but I like that a lot, and it makes so much sense. If you're not fighting, then you've already accepted the outcome. So I very much appreciate that experience, Cher. I don't think I've come across anyone personally who was in business during '08, had the challenges you had, and then came out of those challenges to continue being successful without declaring bankruptcy, like you said, or some of the other reputation killers. Because clearly you still have a great reputation. You're still borrowing from banks. You still have all the connections that you need to keep the business moving forward. How did '08 change the way you think about your business and then the next decade or so of your company?
Well, involuntarily, we downsized. As I said, people left, and we were much smaller. And I actually closed my office in 2010. Just couldn't sustain the organization back then because everybody had left. And I went to another small company startup and said, here, you manage these assets and just give me a few desks and I'll bring some people. And I signed a 5-year deal in 2010. And in 2015, I was at a crossroads, and I was, trying to figure out, I'm 68 now, so I guess I was about 60 years old. Do I want to renew with these people? Do I want to go somewhere else to another bigger company? Do I want to sell the management company? Do I want to sell the properties? I went through every scenario, And at the end of the day, I said, nobody can do it as well as I can do it myself. So I reopened Walpert Properties. We've owned a center at 270 and Olive in Creve Coeur since 2002. So there was a space available in there. We put our office in there. It's ended up being a great location. We have signage, and reopened. And just a small, same CFO, Mike Hurwitz and I, and accounting person, and one daughter from, she was living in Chicago, moved back to St. Louis. She joined us in asset management, and she's done great. It's been 8 years. She went on maternity leave and had a baby. The baby's turning a year this week. And actually, when the maternity leave was winding down, I sat down with her and said, do you want to retire completely? Do you want to stay on full-time, or would you want to go part-time? She said, part-time would be great. Have a nanny 1 day a week. I'll come in the office 1 day a week and be available by email and phone the rest of the time. And it's worked out great. And great for me because she has phenomenal technical skills and personal skills. The tenants like her. And if she would have said, I'm going to retire completely, I would have been calling her 3 times a week for favors because she knows so much. And another daughter comes in 3 mornings a week when her kids are 8 and 9. When the kids are in school, she comes in for a couple hours in the morning and does some admin work. And then I've been teaching our young 23-year-old son. He's been going to some meetings with me. So we're getting the kids involved, which is really fun. And also, if I get hit by a bus, my wife and kids, people know something about the properties and know what to do. But I'm at a point where I still love what I do. I love the interaction. I'm in a business where I don't have to work 40 hours a week anymore, and I still look forward to going in. I don't have to be at the desk all the time. It's a lot of fun.
And are you still actively looking for new acquisitions?
Well, so about 2 years ago, I had a pretty big event. So in backing up to 2008, 9, 10, 11 were the tough times. 2012, the capital markets had progressed enough where I was able to wrap 13 shopping centers into one loan. And I was able to buy out some partners. Some of them got diluted, where if we had a shopping center, it was cash flowing, and we were making distributions. Then '08 came. All of a sudden, we had 5 vacancies. And then we had that thing called a cash call. And hello, people weren't returning the phone call. It's interesting to see what happens. So some people decided not to put cash in and got diluted. Well, those were pretty tough times for me. I was putting money in, but got through it, got it leased up, and now a couple of those deals I own 100% of by virtue of dilution, and now there's good times. But back to 2012, I was able to get a CMBS loan, which is an institutional loan, commercial mortgage-backed securities, where we wrapped 13 shopping centers all together that I owned 100% of without partners, and was able to get it was a 10-year fixed loan, which it was a big day. Got away from 10 or 11 banks, fixed the rate for 10 years, and it was non-recourse, no personal signatures. So that was great. The challenge is they lock it up and throw away the key for 10 years, so you can't sell, refinance. I had some big tenant finishes. One of them was 7 figures, couldn't go back to the till. So it was challenging, but got through it. And toward the end, the market had improved, and I was doing the countdown. I got 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I wanted to get out of that loan. So those were the older B and C grade neighborhood centers where the areas didn't get better, but I worked very hard and kept them leased and created value. I stayed in the weeds. Every single tenant was in my cell phone on a first name basis. If they didn't pay the rent by the 10th or 15th, I was calling them along with my asset manager. So I stayed involved in these properties. So 2022, the loan was finally up. And I started working on it about a year in advance. The plan was to sell those properties and do 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. And number 1, upgrade and buy better properties. And number 2, focus on the St. Louis market. rather than being in multiple states. So I started working on it about a year in advance, and I started leveraging my 40-year reputation and relationships and calling people and say, hey, I'm going to have some trade money. I'm interested in your shopping center, but I can't close till August of 22. Well, call me next spring. So I kept calling people. Same thing on the sell side. I had buyers for these things. Some of them were tenants. I promise I'm going to sell it to you, but I can't close till next August. So it was a symphony of all of these moving parts of selling 11 shopping centers and buying, I think, 7. Some of them were larger deals. On a 1031, you could sell 3 and buy 1, or other way around, any combination. It was a big job. I had piles of papers and files all over my desk, my credenza to the floor. I was driving the attorneys and the title companies crazy. There was a lot of transactions, a lot of tenants, a lot of estoppel certificates, a lot of different loans. But we did it. And we got rid of the B and C grade centers in those areas with a lot of mom and pop tenants. So the mom and pop tenant, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the backbone of the United States of people starting small businesses. But I would take the leasing calls and they'd say, I'm thinking of opening a business. Well, today the properties that we've traded into, our tenants are Taco Bell, Mattress Firm, Honey Baked Ham, Buffalo's Wild Wings, UPS, Ferguson Plumbing, credit. And out of 15 shopping centers today, we have 2 vacancies. And I find that it takes longer to find the right tenant. I'm being selective. But the right tenant is more likely a chain or somebody with multiple locations or a franchise. We've just put in Hot Works, Osteo Strong. There's these great new franchises that are, and I'll make a little more of investment on the front end, give them some tenant finish, but I know they're not going to close 2 years later. So our retention's very, very high. So the credit tenants, so the management today is much different. We don't have delinquencies. We're not calling individual people saying, where's the rent? So it's completely different. But I worked 25 years on those B and C grade properties to be in a position to pay down the principal and have the equity to sell those and buy the better properties on lower cap rates, which we could not have done in the 90s or 2000s. I couldn't compete and buy a 7 or 7.5 cap, which is what we bought today. So sometimes the younger people from the outside looking in, it looks easy, but as I said, I worked those properties for 25 years to be able to do that.
And would you say the timing worked out for you when you did that exchange in terms of, if you were to do that today, do you think you would have gotten a lower valuation on the sale?
I have not seen a big difference in the cap rates commensurate with the interest rates, which is interesting. So we were coming up on 2 years since we did those trades, and we pretty much bought it 7.5 caps. And that's still pretty much the market for unanchored strips. And we financed at 4.5%, and now the interest rates are 8.5%. So, everything's more expensive today. I just got the invoice for our car insurance. It went up 30%. The triple net leases, the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, the tenants, these bills we send, insurance has gone up so much. I have one shopping center in Minnesota. The taxes are $9 a square foot. It's just incredible what's happened. When I first got in the business, a brand new roof, a tear off and brand new roof was $1.25 a foot. Now it's $10 to $12 a foot. Construction costs, everything has gone up so much. My friends in the restaurant business are talking about food costs. It's gone up so much. So it's interesting that the retail rents have not gone up as much. They've gone up, but not as much.
Do you think that's because a lot of the tenants are just being squeezed everywhere else that they just simply can't afford to pay higher rents at this point? Or do you think it could be some other reason?
As I said, the supply and demand. There's really no new retail being built unless it's a build-to-suit. If you drive by and see something under construction, it's a Mercy Health or things like that. You don't even see a Walgreens built anymore. It's called QSR, quick service restaurants. Those are hot. But, unless you can do a build to suit for a credit tenant, you don't see much new construction. So yeah, rents are going up. The vacancy rate is historic low at, as I said, 2% on the small shops. It depends on the asset class. The junior anchors, like I said, the Bed Bath & Beyonds that went bankrupt. Malls are a completely different animal. In the 90s, there were 150 new malls being built a year. That was a big part of our lives. Our moms would drop us off at the mall, and we meet our friends, and it was entertainment. You either go out to dinner, you go to a movie, or go to a mall. And the paradigm shifted. People aren't doing that. Now it's speed and convenience, and if you can pull up to a strip center and drop off your cleaning, get your nails painted, or pick up a sub sandwich, you want the ease of pulling in. Nobody wants to walk around a mall. Obviously e-commerce has been one of the biggest changes to the retail landscape. But total retail sales in the United States in 2020 was $5.5 trillion, and in 2023 was $7.5 trillion. Massive increase in 3 years. But today, e-commerce is still only 15% of total retail sales. I mean, you think everybody orders everything on the internet, but they're 15% of the total, which is an interesting statistic. That there's still a lot of retail sales being done through bricks and mortar.
Got it. And I appreciate the clarification. For some reason, I thought you said retail rents haven't gone up. So appreciate the clarification there.
Again, it depends on the type of property. I mean, if you got a great location, newer construction, yeah, there's some high rents. We just did a deal inline space. It was an anomaly. It was $45 a square foot. It's a real tight market. There's no other space. It's a national credit tenant. But most of our retail rents are in the $10 to $20 range. It just depends on the property. But, you read about multifamily rents going up 4%, 6% in a year. Those are one-year leases. If you sign an apartment lease, you're in it for 1 year. And the next year, either you're going to move or you're going to pay another 4 or 5% in rent. Retail leases are 3, 5, even 10-year leases. Sometimes there's escalations, as other times they're flat for 5 years, but the retail rents don't escalate like that.
Got it. That makes sense, and I appreciate that clarification again. So we've been talking for over an hour. I want to be respectful of your time. I do have a couple more questions I want to ask you while we're here. One. What is your gut telling you today in terms of where we are, not only with retail real estate, but with commercial real estate in general? Do you think we're going to see a lot of distress, or is it just maybe deal by deal based on if someone was over leveraged or not? Do you have any general thoughts there?
Again, I would break it down to asset class.
Sure.
The unanchored neighborhood strip center that I've described, I'm very bullish on. I don't think tenants are leaving. I don't think rents are going down. You can't build a new one to compete. The junior boxes and big boxes we went over, those are a changing landscape. And of course, the regional malls are, there's a couple in each market that are still doing well, but for the most part, those are gone. The office buildings, we all know what's happened since COVID. I read a statistic that 44% of office buildings are worth less than they were in 2020 before the pandemic. That's a staggering number. And there's $500 billion of debt coming due every year for the next 5 years. $2.5 trillion of debt's coming up. So, some of the larger retail with the big boxes, the office buildings, who knows? It's going to be tough for banks. Banks can't own every office building, so something's got to give. Some of them are being repurposed into residential. If they're the right floor plate, they're being redone to multifamily and things like that. But, the neighborhood strip centers I'm in, and again, I'm not a genius. I didn't see this 45 years ago when I get into it. It's kind of the blind squirrel finding the nut. I went to work for a guy that was in retail, and I just always stuck with retail. So today, our centers are very well leased and well positioned, and it's still fun. But as I said, the people with office buildings and some of those types of properties, I think, it's going to be a lot tougher.
So I guess what I was getting at was, do you foresee another 2008? And it sounds like you don't. You don't think there's going to be broader structural issues coming up?
I don't. I think 2008 was based on fraud. So the regulations, the pendulum has swung so far the other way. To get a loan, the criteria is pretty tough. So I don't see that happening again. Some asset classes might be overbuilt. The biggest thing beyond our control is interest rates. And, you can be the smartest guy, the hardest working guy, but there's things beyond your control. You can plan. Wayne Gretzky said what made him great was he went to where the puck is going to be, not where it is. So, yeah, you can plan and think you have the foresight of where things are going, but there's things beyond your control. So, yeah, 2008 was beyond our control. The pandemic was beyond our control. Interest rates are beyond our control. But if you have the basics of the real estate and you treat people right and you have a good reputation and everything runs in cycles, you go through the ups and the downs. Everyone I talk to think that the interest rates have pretty much peaked. And, we're all waiting to see what happens with the election, of course, but hopefully they'll be coming back down. People are still bidding over list price for homes because of the shortage of product, supply and demand, even at 7 and 8% interest rates. So, the economy is good. I mean, it's 4% unemployment and, everything's good. So we're just waiting to see what happens with interest rates.
I would agree with that. Like you mentioned, you're seeing strong demand on the retail side. We're seeing strong demand on the apartment multifamily side as well in terms of occupancy and rents. So I think overall we're in a good place. Before we jump into the last question, which is the hole-in-one, I'd love to ask if you have like a favorite deal. Yeah, I don't know if you do or not, but a favorite deal in terms of maybe one that either you loved the real estate, the location, the way it worked out financially. Maybe you don't, but I'm just curious if you have one.
I didn't think about that before sitting down, but of the new properties we bought 2 years ago, I like all of them. And if somebody would have told me years ago when I was buying those lower end properties that I would own this type of product, I'm really proud to own this stuff. And it's, as I said, life is easier. We bought one at 70 and Mid Rivers Drive. It's Bob's Discount Furniture and mostly credit tenants. It's signalized intersection. It's just great real estate. We bought a couple on Highway K. I just enjoy going to the properties, talking to those tenants. Business is good. They're well located. It's a lot of fun. I would say favorite deals, over the years, sometimes, as I said, my expertise was structuring deals, and sometimes terms is better than price. Price is obviously important, but there were deals where I remember one in particular. We bought the 2 corners of Chambers and Halls Ferry in North County from the original family that developed it. They probably owned the ground before the street went through, and they developed both sides. And they were old, rundown strip centers. And I remember the numbers. It was $180,000 net income, and we bought it for $1 million, which is an 18 cap. And we got an $800,000 loan from the bank, and they carried a $200,000 second. So again, back to the no money down. It was very unusual, but nobody wanted these things. It was a rough neighborhood even at the time. This is many years ago, and they were in very poor condition. But again, looked at the underlying real estate. We closed on it, put no money down. It cash flowed because we bought it on a high interest rate. And then about 3 years later, Walgreens came along. We tore down one corner and did a build to suit for Walgreens and sold it and made a good profit. I didn't know Walgreens was going to be there, but I just said, this is 2 signalized intersections. Whether it's a bank or fast food restaurant, somebody's going to want to be here. So that's the most important thing, is looking at the fundamentals of the real estate.
That's phenomenal. And quick side note, I think we bought a couch or something at that Bob's that you were mentioning, the Bob's Discount Furniture. So I'm very familiar with the real estate. The pride of ownership shows in the way you talk about your real estate portfolio. And also another pattern that I'm kind of seeing as well, aside from the pride of ownership, is you being willing to be open about the struggles, the challenges, and what it took to go from the B's and C's to the A's, and just being honest about your experience, which I appreciate, and I'm sure the listeners appreciate. With your portfolio, are you thinking now? It sounded like you are, but I don't want to speak for you. It sounded like you're kind of thinking generational with the portfolio and the company in terms of future generations of your family.
I think so. If go back to the getting hit by a bus, if that would have happened prior to 2 years ago, I would have left a mess. Those properties were very hard to manage, and it took a different mindset. Today, I'm 68 and I'm healthy and I'm still having fun. Nobody knows how long they're going to be around, but the next generation could take care of these properties. And as I said, my wife is involved, my children are involved, and it's also this business. It's not like a retail store where you have to wait for a customer to walk in and you're standing behind the counter and inventory and all that. These are managing shopping centers. So at any given time, we could pick up the phone and call one of the other commercial real estate companies around town and say, you want to manage these shopping centers, and 30 days later, they'd be managing them. So you can keep the assets and keep the income stream and not be in the day-to-day management if you wanted to. So that's another good thing about commercial real estate. And these assets are, as I said, much different to manage than the older properties with the mom and pop tenants.
That makes sense. And I've never actually thought too deeply about retail operations, retail real estate operations. So it sounds like it's very similar to multifamily, to where if you own an A asset, it's very easy, relatively easy to find a good management company to run it for you if you want a management company to run it for you. But if you own like a C asset or even a B asset, it's going to be a little more challenging to find the right fit that's going to operate the property the right way.
And the exit strategy. These types of properties are a commodity. You could call any number of people today and there'd be a lot of buyers lined up, whereas the older properties, you had to find the right buyer.
That makes sense. And calling them a commodity is a great way of putting it, because that's truly how they're viewed by buyers, sellers, and operators. So like I was mentioning before, Bob, we've been chatting for a little over an hour. You've been very generous with your time, with your experience. But we like to end each show with what we call a hole-in-one, which would be your greatest piece of advice that you could give someone for them to implement in either their personal life or their business today.
I would say, I think if people asked what they thought of me, I think I have a very good reputation. I've treated people right. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the richest guy, but I have treated people right. And I always think of Maya Angelou's statement of people will not remember what you said, people will not remember what you did, but people will remember how they made you feel. And that is so true. I mean, you could run into somebody you hadn't seen in 10 or 15 years, and you kind of cringe and think, boy, I remember the way that guy treated me. Good or bad. And I remember early on in my career, the older guys that were nice to me and that gave me the time and were mentors. I still remember those people. And the people that didn't treat me right, I remember them. So I think the most important thing is how you treat people. All the way from, contractors, investors, friends, family, all the way down to doormen, service people, everybody. I just always tried to treat everybody the same as I wanted to be treated, and I think that's the most important thing.
I appreciate you sharing that, and I think that's a great piece of advice that all of us, even if we're currently operating that way, can look to keep in mind or keep top of mind. Thanks for your time, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Enjoyed it, Raj.